Okay, I am so honored to be talking with Commander Billie J. Farrell of the United States Navy. At 39, Commander Farrell became the first woman commander of the USS Constitution, a 224-year-old warship named Old Ironsides and the oldest commissioned warship in the US Navy. The ship is based in Boston, where Commander Farrell lives with her husband, Paul Farrell, and their two children, ages 6 and 3. It's also important to note that the Constitution is still an active sailing ship with a crew of 80 active duty sailors. Commander Farrell was one of 10 women featured in a recent New York Times Women and Leadership special report, highlighting women around the world making significant contributions to our society. She was born and raised in Kentucky, graduated from the Naval Academy in 2004, and pursued a master's in science in operations management, which we're going to talk about, and has held several positions in the Navy. And I laughed out loud when I saw that Wikipedia states her occupation as sailor. So thank you so much. We are here to talk about leadership. And so let's start on how you view leadership. How would you describe your leadership style? And how have you developed it? What sort of shaped your thinking and your approaches?
So after 4 years at the Naval Academy, we spent a lot of time there talking about leadership and going to classes and reading a lot, educating ourselves on all the different tools and things that are available to leaders. But I think kind of it really wasn't until I got to my first ship. And so my job in the Navy, I'm a surface warfare officer. So my job in the Navy, in very plain terms, is to fight and drive ships and to lead sailors. That's a huge part of what I do. And so when I got to my first ship, I was handed a division of about 10 sailors. I was the electrical officer on the ship. So I was handed the electrical distribution of the entire ship of Ticonderoga class guided missile cruiser. And I had to learn a little bit. And I think that's the biggest thing, is learning is how you become an effective leader. And so I think there's a lot of trial and error to figure that out. And I think it's also actually really hard to explain what makes good leaders. I think a lot of us can explain very easily what makes a bad leader. And sometimes it's harder to define a good leader because there actually are a huge variety of leadership styles. And so for me, it took some time to figure out what that meant. And really, at the end of the day, I realized I was most effective when I was true to who I was and I was authentic to me. And that came across. And I think that helped me establish myself. But I also think that our leadership style changes over the years. We evolve as we get more experience, as we change and we grow. And the other thing in the Navy is sometimes when we show up somewhere, a command climate has already been set. You know, you could have a command, the ship here is 80 people. I was the new person when I got here. And so I had the benefit of being the captain. And so my leadership style was the one that was going to set the tone for the rest of the command. But if you walk in kind of another middle management position in the Navy, you have to kind of find where your place is and find where your leadership style is going to fit the best, or maybe even if you need to change it to balance out some of the other leadership styles that are already in that place. And so it's been a journey for sure.
Right. And given that it will continue to be a journey, right, as your career evolves. It was very interesting that you said about learning. And so as you've been learning, what has most influenced your development? Did you purposely seek out mentors, or did you find mentors along the way as you progressed and learn from them?
So naturally, I developed bonds with a lot of my captains along the way. And so all the ships I served on, I had really great captains that I feel very blessed to have served with and served under. And so a lot of them took me under their wing and sometimes I think saw something in me I didn't necessarily see in myself even, and pushed me to say, you need to command a ship. This is something you need to do in the Navy. And so I definitely think surrounding myself with those people and usually I didn't have to so much seek them out as they naturally came into my life throughout, changing duty stations or something like that. But I do think mentorship is something that can't really be forced. You have to kind of develop that bond with someone and trust them. And so often when we talk about diversity across the board, I also challenge people to diversify their mentors, have more than one mentor, find people that don't look like you, to search out those different opinions and different backgrounds and different life stories, because it just provides a whole nother level of education and perspective into your own decision making and your own leadership style.
Right, right. And not only don't look like you, but maybe don't think like you. Did you ever find that you know, with a mentor, as they were guiding you, advising you, and it didn't fit with what you were thinking? And how did you sort of wrestle through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're going to exactly that. You're going to come across people that have differing views and different perspectives, and they aren't always aligned with what you see, but taking that into account. And I think just, seeing it for what it is and face value and talking through it does absolutely aid to decision making and leadership style. And so I think at the end of the day, though, you have to just bring yourself to the table and be willing to listen fully, and then take that on for what it is. And exactly that. Sometimes if I've got a problem, I'll call to mentors that I know are going to have differing views, to challenge myself to think, and to kind of see both sides of the story and maybe a perspective I hadn't seen before.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that's really fabulous for people to hear, that you do seek out those other approaches and weigh them. When you are looking at, well, we're talking about learning. So let's continue on with the skills and the thinking that is around your leadership table, if you like. And tell us a bit about how that comes into a leadership team in the Navy, which is different than hiring. We were talking about that before we started. And then I'm going to ask you about your work in professional development.
Sure. Yeah. So the difference with the Navy is we don't hire into our ranks in the sense of, if I have an open position, I'm not looking to fill it. The Navy will fill it for me. And so we kind of alluded to that earlier. We receive orders. And so you show up somewhere, you're executing the orders that the Navy gave you. And so, I don't get to necessarily pick. Here's a little different at Constitution. We actually do get to pick the crew, since it's a special duty assignment in the Navy, but every other ship, your detailer, who is the person that does our assignments, you give them a list of your preferences, they balance that against the needs of the Navy, and then you show up to a new command, and you report as the new person. And so it kind of goes back to what we were saying, that a lot of times you have to find where your skill set fits best, and then trust kind of the upper management at a command and the upper leadership, because you do get evaluations throughout your career, that grade you on all the skills that it requires to be a leader and in charge of a warship in this case. And those are all balanced against your peers or from all over the world that are doing the same job.
Right, right. So in one of your roles, you were in professional development for the Navy. And I know that you also taught at the Naval Academy. Are you still teaching at the Naval Academy?
I am not. So I still have a great relationship with the Naval Academy, and I definitely loved that job there, teaching the midshipmen. That was kind of the next generation headed out to the fleet. See how excited they were was almost reinvigorating for me before I even went back to another ship myself. And while I was the deputy director of professional development, I taught a couple of courses while I was there. One, in the fall semester, I would teach a seamanship and navigation course, kind of a fundamental of being in the Navy and serving at sea, obviously. And even for those midshipmen that would later serve in different roles, not at sea, the seamanship and navigation established kind of the fundamentals they would need to move on in their naval careers. And then in the spring semester, I would actually teach surface warfare officer practicum. So the midshipmen that were headed out to ships to serve like I did, I would teach them kind of a 101 level course on what it was going to be like on their first ship and how to make the most of that. And so that was great. And then under us as well, we had the sailing program, the summer training program, officer accessions, which is how midshipmen found out where they were going to serve after graduation. And I'm forgetting one. So
that's legitimate. So in your work in professional development, or even in your advice to those who are starting their career and want to move into leadership positions, within ships, within the Navy, if you had to, use your hand and do the 5 top skills or types of thinking that are really important, what would those 5 things be? How would you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, anyone I talk to is new sailor when they check into my ship, or anyone going out into the fleet. I tell them that it all kind of starts with a foundation of dignity and respect. We all raised our right hand to the Constitution of the United States to support and defend it. And once you raised your right hand and took that oath, we said we had each other's backs. And so it all really is the foundation of what we do in that sense. And so I talk about that a lot. I think it's really important to remain humble and to admit when you're wrong. A lot of times we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. And so to be able to constructively look at those things and take that on and to grow from it, takes some humility, but I think at the end of the day, definitely makes you a much better leader, and a much better person in a lot of cases. And so to have that is definitely something I anchor on a lot. And then I tell people to, especially younger audiences, to surround themselves with positive people. I had a lot of people that helped me throughout my career. I did not get here by myself. And so anytime you can surround yourself with people that want you to do well and challenge you and push you to be better, it just results in, I think, a much stronger team, and also in just enhancing the skill sets that you already have.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Have there been pivotal points in your career that were fundamental to your progress? Even your choice of doing a master's in operation management.
So I think for my career, my most challenging jobs have been my most rewarding, and kind of the same that we had talked about earlier. But the jobs where I had to dig deep to find things in myself that weren't necessarily there because we were deployed for longer than planned, and I had to be the person that kept people on task and focused on the mission, trying to maintain a positive environment so that they could do the jobs, were definitely some of those moments where I probably learned more about myself, because they were hard. And again, I had to dig deep to find that. And not even for myself, but for other people, which is sometimes more challenging. And then my master's for operations management, it just seemed kind of a natural fit for what we do in the surface side of the Navy and leadership, and tying that in to kind of the bigger sense of what the Navy does. And so it really was, I had a moment where I was on shore duty, not on a ship. I was working in Memphis, Tennessee at the personnel base there. And so the program just happened to align with that, but it did definitely spoke to me in the sense of what the Navy does, and just enhancing how I viewed the Navy and our mission.
Right. Now this could be something that we black out if you want, but it amazes me when and I've been able to interview lots of leaders over the last 30 years, which is a real honor. And how many of them talk about the self-reflection. And are you a reflector? Do you keep a reflective journal? Do you journal?
I don't journal. I do think I do reflect a lot on things, and then this job in particular, and doing so many interviews, has definitely put that in the forefront more than it has been in the rest of my career. And I think it's actually been more of a challenge to try to not only self-reflect, in the sense of me benefiting, but trying to then make it something I can communicate to other people that they understand and can hopefully use some of those lessons from as well.
Right. Great. What do you find most exciting about leading and managing? Because you're also a senior manager, those two things go together. A really complex organization like the oldest constitutional sailing ship in the U.S. Navy.
Yeah, so I think every time I set foot on the ship, I'm just humbled to be here. And the ship is a battleground. Sailors and Marines gave their lives on the decks of this ship, to really establish the freedoms that we have today and establish the Navy that we have today. It was the first major naval victories we had as a country against some major naval powers. And so to be part of that legacy and to continue that on, and to be entrusted with keeping this ship alive, is just an amazing experience. And so it's kind of the contrast is some of my favorite times on the ship are when it's quiet and I really just can reflect on that. But then my other favorite part about the job is going out and interacting with the public and talking to them and talking to children about, the Navy of 18, not that different than the Navy of 2022. The ship was created for open shipping lanes, freedom of the seas, anti-piracy. And we talk to a lot of the kids sometimes and say, I've done anti-piracy on today's ships, to see them react to that. And just that those are mission sets of 1812 and 2022. It's just nice to see their reactions to that a lot of times.
Yeah, amazing. Both you and your husband are working in senior positions, responsible positions, and you have two little ones at home. One of the questions we always get asked is, how do you manage that?
Sure. Not by ourselves. We have a huge support structure that helps us. We have very supportive families that have helped us along the way. My parents are here right now visiting from Kentucky because we had a very busy week. The ship's birthday, actually, we just celebrated the ship's 225th birthday, and it was very busy. And my husband has gone back to school and is working at the same time. And so it was a busy week. So we called in the reinforcements for sure. My husband just retired from 20 years of the Navy. And so I think for us, the other key part has been very open and honest communication. So, when we found out I was coming to this job, it was a conversation about the things that were going to come with this job, which were a lot of outside hour engagements and doing things like that. And we decided to do it together. And I think that's been key for us. Is every move we've made a decision together on how to be successful, and how to balance each other careers out so that we could both continue to stay upwardly mobile within our fields.
Right. And I know you are interviewed a lot, and I'm sure that people do seek you out as a mentor and probably ask you for advice on that very issue of life. And what advice do you give them?
Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier. I think for the most part, I really do just kind of, tell people they have to be true to who they are and find that balance of their leadership style and doing that. And really back to the having that support network. None of us can really do this alone. And so, that goes in mentorship, that goes in whoever's in your corner. And, so much of the Navy in particular, I tell our junior sailors, if you don't have a support structure, the great thing about the Navy is we give you one. You have a command here of 80 people that are in your corner ready to help you. And so you just have to learn to make sure that you ask for it when you need it and communicate again. And just to find those positive people that want you to do well, that push you to success.
Right, right. I interviewed a university dean of libraries a couple of years ago, and she was very frank. And then since then, other people have been supportive of this, that she said, you need energy. One of her pieces of advice was, people need to understand it's tiring and you need lots of energy. Is that the case for you too? Do you tell them that?
Yeah, absolutely. But for us, for the Navy, we have a phrase, we say shipmate self, and kind of the order that are the priorities, thinking that we're here for a higher purpose and a higher mission than just ourselves. And that's the reason we decided to serve. But what I talk to the crew about a lot, and even for myself, is while that is a hierarchy, they are still all connected, and you can't take care of ship and shipmate if you don't take care of self. And so, that starts with me setting the tone here for the command. And so there are days where exactly that. I've had lots of engagements. We've had lots of things going on around the ship. And I have to sometimes say, I'm going to take the day off, and I have to set that tone so that the crew sees me doing the same thing and taking my own advice, which I think sometimes is hard for upper. But set that tone so that they see that and they take care of themselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This interview is going to be used not only by the SLA, which is the Special Library Association, and Kentucky chapter in particular. It's also going to be used for the Library Leadership Institute that I'm responsible for, which is LEAD. And our framework, if you like, is that leadership is not about the leader, it's about the ship. And we use this entire analogy of understanding your ship and how it operates and what is coming in the waves or what's at the dock and where you're going to. So I love that shipmate self. That's going to get added to the framework. Thank you. My last question for you is, because you are interviewed a lot, and I know you are sought out a lot, what question, if you were doing this interview with you, what question would you ask? What question do you wish people would ask?
I actually don't even know. I feel like probably asked such a wide variety of questions. I'm usually surprised the most by children and what they ask me. And so sometimes it's just, again, when I go out and talk to the ship, we get a lot of school kids, and sometimes I have to change my vantage point because I don't see things from the same level they do physically. And they'll ask something on the ship, and I will have to get down on my knees to look to see what they're seeing. And so I think, just to sometimes, again, just changing that perspective in the physical or symbolic sense is just telling. And so inevitably they surprise me with something they ask. So I think if I ever got thrown in front of a group of kids, that would probably keep me on my toes.
I bet it would. And isn't that a wonderful analogy, to get down on your knees and see what it is that they're seeing?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And how was the 225th anniversary?
It was great. We actually took the ship out that day. We were gone for 4 hours. We had Secretary of the Navy here, the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, so two very senior leaders within the Navy in our organization. We had about 170 prior crew members that came back to get out on the harbor with us. Some of them served all the way back in the 1960s, and so it just was a beautiful day to have them here and take the ship out, and to really celebrate and commemorate all the great things that the ship has done through her life, and the people that have kept her alive during those 225 years.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. I cannot thank you enough because it's really, fitting this into your schedule, and for your honesty and candor. It's been really fabulous.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Commander.